Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kevin Cook. I am a research associate at the Public Policy Institute of California's Higher Education Center. Welcome to our virtual program today featuring the findings from our report implementing California's Universal Financial Aid Application Policy. The report and accompanying materials from today's briefing can be found on our website at ppic.org. The research and event are supported with funding from the Evelyn and Walter Haas Jr. Fund, Kresge Foundation, and Sutton Family Fund. We'd like to thank them for their support. I'd also like to thank my co-authors for this report, Jake Jackson, Selena Gomez, and Madeline Rorda. For today's program, I will present some of the findings from the main findings from the report. I'll then turn it over to Olga Rodriguez, Director of the PPIC Higher Education Center and Senior Fellow, who will moderate a discussion on the key challenges and opportunities involved in implementing California's Universal Financial Aid Application Policy. Before opening it up to questions from the audience for the final 15 minutes of the program. If you have a question for our speakers, please send it along with your name and organization to the email address on the screen, ppiceventquestions@gmail.com. As a reminder, PPIC is a public charity and does not take or support positions on any ballot measure or legislation, nor does it support, endorse, or oppose any political parties or candidate or for public office. And now on to the presentation. California's higher education systems can provide a ladder for economic mobility within the state, but their efficacy is largely dependent on keeping higher education accessible to all Californians. For most students, college access depends upon financial aid. To be eligible for federal aid programs like the Pell Grant, work study, and federal loans, most students and their families must complete and submit the free application for federal student aid, also known as the FAFSA. State financial aid programs like the Cal Grant and institutional aid provided by colleges and universities also rely on the information provided by the FAFSA to determine program eligibility and determine financial aid packages for student applicants. Students without citizenship status are ineligible for federal financial aid programs, but the California DREAM Act application, also known as the CADA, allows these students to access state and institutional aid programs in our state. It's important to note that financial aid application forms are also used to determine eligibility for grants and career education programs, trade schools, and community colleges as well. The majority of students at both UC and CSU systems do not pay tuition due to a combination of federal, state, and institutional financial grant aid. And California students have some of the lowest debt loads in the nation. However, none of these generous financial aid programs are available to high school graduates in our state if they do not first complete a FAFSA or CADA form by the deadline. Indeed, the information provided to students and their families through completing a financial aid application form can be critical to understanding what options a high school graduate has as they move to start their adult lives. That said, the number of students who complete this form in our state has been far too low for decades. From 2007 to 2021, on average, just over 50% of California's high school graduates completed a financial aid application form, meaning that nearly 250,000 high school graduates a year finished high school without a complete picture of what educational options were available to them and what those options would cost. In fact, research from EdTrust West and UC Davis Wheelhouse showed that in 2020-2021, California high school grads left about $550 million in potential financial aid available to them on the table. The National College Attainment Network, also known as the NCAN, has also shown that completing the FAFSA can boost college enrollment. Nationally, seniors who complete the FAFSA are 84% more likely to immediately enroll in a higher education institution. Furthermore, for students in the lowest economic quintile, FAFSA completion is associated with a 127% increase in immediate college enrollment. As Governor Newsom seeks to increase the share of Californians aged 25 to 64 who hold a degree or certificate to 70% of the population by 2030, ensuring more seniors complete the FAFSA is a crucial step. In an effort to boost financial aid application, the state legislature passed AB 132, which required California school districts and charter schools to show that each of their high school seniors had completed a FAFSA or CADA form or formally opted out by graduation. During that same session, the legislature also passed AB 469, which further clarified this requirement and charged the California Student Aid Commission, or CSAC, with the responsibility for implementing this program across the state for the 2022-23 academic year. Currently, 15 states have what has been called a universal FAFSA policy, including states like Texas, Illinois, Colorado, Alabama, Connecticut, Nebraska, and New York, just to name a few. The policy is catching on fast, with 14 of 15 states having passed this legislation since 2021. Though these policies are similar across the states, there is some variation in who is accountable for ensuring students complete the form. In Texas and Alabama, for example, completing the FAFSA or state financial aid application form is a graduation requirement, meaning students must complete the form to graduate and receive their diploma. In our state, Maryland, and a few other states, the laws place the onus on the school district to ensure students complete the form with unspecified consequences for failing to do so. In every state that has a universal FAFSA policy, students are allowed to voluntarily opt out of the process if they complete a simple. The rapid growth and popularity of these policies can be attributed to the clear evidence showing that they can significantly increase financial aid application completion rates. For example, in every state that completed this policy, they saw an immediate increase in the FAFSA applications in the first year, though the magnitude of this change varies. California's experience with this policy has largely mirrored its success in other states. In the first year that the state implemented this policy, the combined FAFSA and CADA completion rate rose by about 16%. Equivalent to an additional 42,000 high school seniors in the state completing the financial aid application. This chart shows the FAFSA and CADA completion rate for high school seniors in California going back to the class of 2017. You can see that at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was about a 4% decline in completion rate. However, the large jump from 2022 to 23, when the state implemented its universal financial aid application policy, the jump in the completion rate is significant and noticeable. I'll get to the reasons behind the large decline from 2023 to 24 shortly. Okay, so an increase in FAFSA completion rate should be expected after requiring school districts to ensure that their students complete this form. What is more important, though, is who is now completing the FAFSA that was not before this policy was implemented. Here I am showing the breakdown of those additional 42,000 high school seniors who completed the FAFSA in 2023 by Student Aid Index. Student Aid Index is a new measure of a student and their family's ability to pay for college. It replaces an older measure, EFC, or expected family contribution, and is essentially a proxy for family income and assets. What is important to note here is that though we see an increase in financial aid application across income levels, by far the largest increase in applications came from students who would benefit the most from financial aid, students in the 0 to negative 1,500 category. These students have family incomes of about $25,000 to $30,000 a year and have few assets. We also broke down the first year increase in FAFSA and CADA completions by race and ethnicity and parental education level. Our findings showed a similar percentage increase in financial aid applications between students whose parents attended college and those who had only attended high school, about 15 to 16% respectively. We found a similar trend when looking at race and ethnicity. Each racial and ethnic subgroup tracked by CSAC and the California Department of Education increased by 4 to 9 percentage points, with Latino, Filipino, Pacific Islander, and Native American students experiencing the largest increases. Though California's universal financial aid application policy appears to increase FAFSA applications across the board, the fact that it increased completion for the state's lowest income and least represented students in the public college system suggests it is a useful strategy to improve equity in students' access to college. It's important to note that though California's financial aid application rate increased to nearly 70% after implementing this policy, still about 30% of students did not complete a FAFSA, CADA, or opt out. To try and understand what types of obstacles school districts were facing as they implemented this policy and to identify programs and practices that were particularly helpful, we interviewed and conducted site visits across the state with district leaders and counselors. We spoke with districts in rural, suburban, and urban districts with a range of FAFSA completion rates across the state. Across these districts, we heard similar stories about what challenges they faced. Many of these obstacles to the implementation of this policy have been longstanding and some were created by the new policy. The most common obstacle we heard from districts and counselors was difficult in obtaining parental participation in the process. Parental participation is key in the financial aid application process, as parents must create their own accounts and upload tax information for 2 years prior to a student completing the FAFSA. Interviewees remarked that often parents did not feel comfortable sharing their financial information. Students with mixed citizenship status, students with one parent who is a citizen and one who is not, were particularly reticent to share their parents' financial information due to fear that it could jeopardize their parents' citizenship status. School counselor caseloads were also an issue for many districts. At every school, counselors were central to meeting the universal financial aid application goal, having responsibility for family and student outreach. The American School Counselor Association recommends a load of about 250 students to one counselor, but many of the districts we spoke to had nearly double that, with caseloads of about 400 to 500 students. Finally, as I mentioned previously, students were allowed to opt out of this process. Typically, students who would opt out are students who had careers already planned out post-high school, intended to join the military, or students with special education needs. Though the Student Aid Commission provided a template for opt-outs, our interviewees did not always feel that there was enough guidance on how to use the form or what to do with the information they collected from the forms they used. The law also stipulates that each school district determine the date to submit the form, leaving districts to decipher how and when to provide the information to students regarding their opt-out choice. Though this is just a small sample of the obstacles we heard from school districts, we also heard about strategies that they employed that seem to support FAFSA and CADA completion. As noted earlier, parental involvement is critical to building trust with families who must provide sensitive information needed to complete the FAFSA or CADA. Some schools and districts relied on partnerships with community resources and organizations to do so. One example is Val Verde Unified School District in Southern California. Val Verde partnered with a local organization that provides free legal services to undocumented and mixed status families of their community. Val Verde mentioned that this organization's support and consulting with families as they completed the financial aid application cultivated a sense of trust and community knowledge that was critical in building support for the policy. Data sharing across schools in the district at the minimum was also an important tool in implementing this policy. Sharing data allowed schools to better locate students who had moved schools, and having a central location readily accessible to school counselors allowed for timely interventions to help students and their families get the help they needed. At the school level, two main strategies seemed to be ubiquitous and helpful. First, many schools did not inform students of the opt-out process until late in the school year. This process likely drove down opt-out rates across the state. Second, creating a festive atmosphere and friendly competition around FAFSA completion served as an important incentive for students and school staff. Finding a way for students to feel valued for their hard work and effort is important. Interviewees noted that even something as small as a pizza party or extra graduation tickets could be a significant incentive for students to complete the form. Similarly, friendly competition between schools in a district to see who could get the highest FAFSA or CADA completion rate also served to motivate school staff and students alike. So far, I've been discussing the successes of the first year of implementation of the Universal Financial Aid Application Policy. However, in the second year of implementing this policy, there was a major shakeup at the federal level that had a detrimental impact on FAFSA completion. For the 2023-24 academic year, the federal government implemented changes to the FAFSA resulting from the FAFSA Simplification Act, also known as Better FAFSA. The act was intended to streamline the FAFSA application process, reducing the number of questions the student had to answer from 108 to 336. But in order to do this, the Federal Student Aid Authority had to rely on APIs to automatically populate an applicant's and their family's tax information from the IRS. However, the implementation of this form rollout at least was premature, and many students found it difficult to complete the form. This issue impacted students and districts in two specific ways, just to name a few. October is the month the school counselors traditionally start working with students to begin collecting their information and logins necessary to complete the FAFSA. But the U.S. Department of Education delayed access to the new FAFSA form from October 2023 to January of 24. This set all schools' FAFSA completion strategies back by 3 months, leaving little time between the rollout and the March 2nd deadline for UC and CSU to complete the FAFSA. Secondly, many students could not complete the form due to technical problems with disproportionately impacted mixed status families. If a parent could not obtain a federal student aid identification number, or if the information they provided did not exactly match IRS and immigration records, the students could then not complete the form. It should be noted that the students from mixed status families are estimated to be about 20% of the state's high school population. As this figure shows, these issues and others resulted in a late and slow start for FAFSA completion in California and across the nation. UC and CSU pushed back their deadline to submit the FAFSA from March 2nd to May 2nd, allowing an additional 100,000 high school seniors to submit the form. The deadline delay meant that the decline in FAFSA completion from the previous year was about 10%, far less than the 50% decline there would have been without the submission date being pushed back. Though problems with the new FAFSA form essentially eliminated the gains in FAFSA completion rate from the previous year after implementing the policy, those losses were not limited to California. At the close of the federal FAFSA cycle on June 30th, the national FAFSA completion rate dropped by 7.2 percentage points. For context, between 2019 and 2020, during the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the FAFSA completion rate declined just 3.9%. However, it should be noted that states that had implemented universal FAFSA policies ranked near the top in terms of FAFSA completion, with Tennessee ranking 2nd, Louisiana ranking 3rd, Illinois 5th, Texas 7th, and California 13th. Nevertheless, the botched rollout of the new FAFSA form meant that 54,000 fewer students completed the FAFSA in 2024 versus 2023 in the state of California. So what can be done as we enter the 3rd year of a universal financial aid application policy in California? First, increasing visibility and accountability with respect to a high school's FAFSA completion rate could help build momentum around completing the form. For example, including FAFSA and CADA completion rate as part of the California School Dashboard could provide students and their families with more information about how their school fares and ensuring its students have the information they need to plan life post-high school. Second, improving data systems and data sharing across schools, districts, regions, and the state would allow for improved tracking of students and allow schools to better target their limited resources. Third, we heard time and again that the more people who are involved in improving FAFSA completion rates, the better the college-going culture at the school and district. This is achieved by incrementally building buy-in from stakeholders such as students, parents, teachers, administrators, mayors, legislators, and the community at large. Districts who were successful in improving their financial aid application rates generally had multiple points of contact with students and families, coupled with events to celebrate key milestones in the process. Finally, building local and regional capacity by partnering with other school districts, nonprofits, community organizations can provide specialized services is important. Long-lasting impacts are created by implementing culturally relevant support through these partnerships and developing an ethos of post-secondary success. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for bearing with me. Now I'd like to hand it over to Center Director Olga Rodriguez, who will moderate a discussion on the key challenges and opportunities involved in implementing California's universal financial aid policy.
Great. Thank you so much for your excellent presentation, Kevin. Good morning, everyone. My name is Olga Rodriguez, and I'm the director of the PPIC Higher Education Center. It's a pleasure to be here today to moderate this discussion on implementing California's universal financial aid application policy. I would now like to invite our panelists to join us. You can find their bios on the PPIC event page. So in the interest of time, I will only do very brief introductions today. We are joined by Catalina Cifuentes, Director of College and Career Readiness at Riverside County Office of Education. We're also joined by Daisy Gonzalez, Executive Director at the California Student Aid Commission. And our third panelist is Kristen Soares, President of the Association of Independent California Colleges and Universities. Thank you all for joining this important discussion, and I'm especially thankful for your leadership on behalf of California students and for being part of PPIC's Higher Education Advisory Council. And so to begin today's discussion, I wanted to share a key statistic that motivates a lot of the work that we do at the Higher Education Center. And so according to PPIC's statewide survey, over 2/3 of California parents hope that their children will graduate with a 4-year degree. Another 20% hope that their children will get a community college or a career training program credential. And these high aspirations should not come as a surprise. Our work and that of our colleagues in other institutions find that a college degree and a college education continues to provide the best opportunity to achieve social and economic mobility. At the same time, the PPIC survey finds that about 3/4 of parents surveyed also express concern about their ability to afford college. So it's clear that our parents in California have high college aspirations for their children, and addressing their concerns around college affordability will be critical to, as Kevin noted, the 70% degree attainment goal that the state has set for us by 2030. And so, as Kevin really well presented, the good news is that California has a policy intended to help us address this issue. I won't go into the details, but I just wanted to say that just as the colleges were in the second year, there were major challenges. We're just now starting the next year, and there are a few hiccups. There's another delay. Still, my intention with today's event is to delve into a discussion about the strategies that can support a successful and strong implementation of California's universal financial aid policy, and to think a little bit about the opportunities that lie ahead. And so to begin, I invite our panelists to share what they see as the most important reason why we should work to ensure a strong implementation of the policy. What are the implications for students, communities, higher education institutions, and the state? And so Catalina, I'll start with you.
Okay, thank you so much, Olga, and thank you, Kevin, for the great information and the facts that were shared. And I'm excited to be here. I'm the Executive Director of College and Career Readiness for Riverside County Office of Education. So I get to serve over 400,000 K-12 students, 23 school districts. So we're a very large county here in California. And we're also the county that had the first 2 school districts that implemented a requirement. They actually made it a graduation requirement in their school districts, and really launched in our county the whole initiative around Race to Submit, ensuring our students apply. When we started this campaign almost 10 years ago, it really stemmed from the same conversation we're having today. Is our students, more than 60 to 65% of them, some of our schools, 90% of them, are first generation or low income, free and reduced lunch, at promise students. And so if they knew what to do, they would do it. They just don't know. They're what we call school dependent. So if they don't get this information from us from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock or 8:30 to 3:30, they may not get this at home. And so those of you who are watching today, if you're first generation, you know what I'm talking about. Even if you were middle or higher income, we still have in our county, a lot of our families that, they're not low income, but they're still first generation. And so they, like you mentioned, Olga, the statistics, they want their students to go to some post-secondary, but they're not sure exactly how to pay for it. So the why for us 10 years ago and even today is really about giving opportunities and access to all students and letting families and parents exercise the custody and control of their children, their future. The problem, what was happening is we weren't getting these FAFSAs and California Dream Act submitted because our parents didn't know, they didn't understand. And so the universal FAFSA and California Dream Act push is really about creating systems of equity. So we in K-12, community colleges, I know they're doing their work and their part, but us in K-12, they're making an educated decision. They're not just saying, well, I don't understand it, so I'm not going to do it, or I'm afraid of it because I'm not sure what information I'm sharing. Is making an effort to ensure they understand, the families understand what it is, what it could bring. And if they're choosing to opt out, then that's okay. We did our part to educate them, but it's not a passive opt out, which is what we were doing in California. Those schools that were energetic and getting financial applications in were getting the resources to families, and your future depended on the zip code in California. prior to this. And that's what we can't have, especially if we want to hit that goal of 70%. It can't depend on the zip code. And I want to add a little bit to some of the barriers, that Kevin shared earlier when they talked about school counselors being 250 to 1. I was a former school counselor. I have a PPS, People Personnel Services credential. And I can tell you, even the schools in California that have 250 to 1 don't have 90% financial aid application completion, because this work cannot just rely on school counselors alone. It has to be a system, a school, a effort, because it affects all of us, not just the school counselors and not just the higher ed institutions. When students aren't doing their FAFSA, right, and you're looking at this data, you see that drop. I want you to imagine in California, as a state, we have well over 60% of our students as a state that potentially qualify for Pell Grant. Pell Grant is federal dollars. How much money have we lost in federal dollars coming back to our states, coming back to our communities, spending at our grocery stores or our coffee shops or our bookstores? This is a community impact that can happen, and we are leaving millions and millions of dollars of federal dollars on the table about students just not submitting their application. So it's really, for us, it's been more than beyond just, get the FAFSA done, but it's really been about the impact it's having on our county. We're also seeing other byproducts of student engagement, right? When students know that they have a future, there's a plan, they're less likely to get in trouble, more likely to come to school, more likely to stay engaged. So we have seen, you can look up at kidsdata.org. Riverside County has the lowest juvenile felony arrest rate than any other large county that serves over 10,000 students in the state of California. There's significant connections to the expectations and the things we're doing that's beyond just doing the FAFSA to pay for school. But I think the biggest push of what we need to focus on and why is ensuring equity for all students. If, like Kevin mentioned, they decide they want to go to the military, that's okay. We did the application, we got it submitted. You're making a choice by May 1st not to go, to take some time off, but you at least know the entry point. The number one barrier I'll share with when we hit the pandemic and we were scrambling in our county, all this work we did for financial applications, our goal is 92%, because we've done the calculation, given students with disabilities, newcomers to the area, and students that don't qualify, our county should hit anywhere from 90 to 92%, right? So that data is so important. That was mentioned in the PowerPoint. We were afraid we were going to lose. Some of our schools hit well above 90%. So we launched an initiative called College Comeback, where we started reaching out to students that after graduation, they still had not done their FAFSA. When we asked them why, or what was happening, or why they didn't enroll, the number one answer across all these students, right? We're talking over 3,000 students. We continue to ask, and it's always affordability. It is always affordability is their number one barrier. It wasn't they didn't take AP calculus, or they didn't take, math 3, or they didn't feel ready for University of Redlands down the freeway from us. It's the affordability. They're not understanding that piece. And so I think we are doing all this other work around curriculum and instruction and more rigorous courses. And the majority of the state needs to understand affordability. And we've just launched in K-12 this focus on financial literacy. So I go back to, it cannot just live with school counselors. We need to look at economics teachers, maybe rethinking economics and financial literacy. We need to go back to more people than just the school counselors are in charge of doing the FAFSA and doing the financial aid application. And some of the success shared by those school districts, that's what's done. The special education teacher is in charge of their caseload. The English learner director is ensuring their English learner students do the FAFSA or the California Dream Act, or find them resources if they don't qualify for either application. So I think there's so many opportunities that our institutions are doing to get engaged and really demystifying the cost of private schools, all these opportunities that our higher ed partners are doing. And so now it's time for our K-12 districts to continue to look at other ways. But we do all of this work. We always say, one of our superintendents from Val Verde used to say, we do all this work for 13, 14 years, and then we're just going to leave them and let them figure it out. And so with that, I think those are just some of the ideas of how do we continue, but we really need to see this. There's a community impact that's happening when our students aren't pursuing post-secondary education, and it's beyond just enrollment in college. We lost over 3,000 students that first year in Riverside County alone, from class of 2020 to class of 2021 enrolled in post-secondary. times that by Pell Grant, times that by what are they doing? Are they working? Are they engaged? Are they getting in trouble? What are they doing? And we own that. Those are still our students. So hopefully that's a few ideas, but I'm definitely open up for questions as well. Olga, so I'll turn it back to you.
Great. And I'll hand it over to Daisy if you can share from your from where you sit at CSAC. Why should we work to ensure a stronger implementation and the impact and implications on students, communities, institutions in the state?
Thank you for that first question, Olga. And it's an honor to be here with Kristen, with Catalina, who also has a different hat serving, and of course, on the California Commission for Financial Aid, which is the California Student Aid Commission. And I have the honor of serving California students now in this role. We are the state agency that manages and oversees all state and federal funds across all higher education segments. I think this is a really important question, and your report kind of creates the foundation for us for this conversation in a really good way. Any policy is meant to be the starting point, right? The tool that helps us to fully implement. So for me, I see your report grounding us in what I call the 3 A's in policy implementation. Awareness is usually our first challenge, then action, and then accountability. And so your report is coming in at a time that California is now reflecting, while at the same time getting ready for that next level of accountability. You have a new bill that just passed that has to be implemented on January 1st that also is trying to tackle universal financial aid applications, and that's AB 2165, which essentially requires that K through 12 use CSAC's opt-out form, one universal way to opt out from completing a financial aid application. We are all different messengers in this journey, from awareness to action to accountability, from the work being done in K through 12 to what the ultimate goal is for all students, right? Financial aid applications are that ticket in to get into that gateway to higher education. And if we do this right, from K through 12 all the way to higher ed, we can get students to our AICCU institutions. This is just one example, right? Since we have Kristen here. If we do this right, it means that we're also building in the equity components of how we do that outreach. Here at CSAC, we do that through our CalSOAP directors, our partnerships with community-based organizations. As Catalina shared, and in your report and Kevin's report, competition gets people energized. So we do have dashboards here at CSAC. We also have a competition across the state of California. But the messages that students receive are very much a part of what promotes their ability to, one, take action to complete the application, two, for people to trust us. And we are all different messengers, but also we are those trusted partners for different communities, from the students to the parents. But the number one problem that we all have is the number of students that are actually getting through, right? So this last cycle, I know Kevin shared the numbers for the prior year. This last cycle statewide, so for 2024-2025, we actually saw 64% of all high school students in the state complete a FAFSA. That is a huge increase, but what happened to everyone else? Nationally, across the other states, 86 is the max. And so what would it look like for us? I want to know who that other state is so we can do better than them, because we're California. And then also, I want us to really think about who are those students that we're leaving behind. And then more importantly for CSAC, once we get you in the door, the most important message that our students need to hear is that that application worked, their information was safe, particularly if you're undocumented, and it led to financial aid access at a scale that allowed you to complete your education. And that's why I think for CSAC, partnering, collaborating, doing that work in partnership is so important.
Wonderful. Thank you, Daisy. Kristen, hand it over to you to share from where you sit at AICCU and kind of the why we should work towards the implementation and what it means for the state and the institutions.
Great. Thank you so much, Olga, and I'm so happy to be here and with the partners who are on this panel. So and just thank you to Kevin too for really going over the report and shedding light on the importance of the universal financial aid policy. When the state passed this, we knew it would be a game changer for students and families to finally have to fill out the FAFSA. And to what Catalina said, affordability is often the key barrier. So if we can start to remove that barrier, then we're going to see more students and families access higher education. And I think the report, what Kevin said, is in the first year of that universal financial aid policy, there was absolutely an increased completion for the least represented and the lowest income families. And these are the students that we have an imperative to serve and serve in our four-year institutions. So I think I'm on this panel, like giving the perspective of higher education institutions. And these, again, these are the students that we have an imperative to serve. For AICCU institutions, as regionally serving institutions, we know more students and families will go to college if it's near their home. So that affordability factor is really important, but the regional program is also critically important. Looking at the policy recommendations that came out of the report, we know that we're going to need to work in partnership with Catalina and other districts, with CSAC and other community-based organizations to, better share what does it mean filling out this FAFSA. It was a hard year last year with the rollout. There's no denying that. But we saw in year one that California had a big increase. So we need to return to that. And this is partnership work. I know we're going to talk about that more in the ensuing questions. So I'll turn it back to you, Olga. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kristen. And so Daisy, congratulations. I saw that you launched the CSAC Student Success Blueprint last week, and I wanted to, this is super exciting for the state and for students, and I wanted to give you a little bit of time to talk to us a little bit about it and its goals and the role you see it playing in helping support the implementation of this policy.
Thank you, Olga. Yes, we're really excited at CSAC because it's a combination of all the work that we know that we have been doing in small glimmers of communities or partnerships. And the work is really about how we take it to scale and work with our partners in a different way. So I love that it's coming up in this space. The reality is a universal application is step one. That's just the way, at least at CSAC, that we see it, right? That's that front door. We still have to help students, especially in a year like last year and this year that's coming up, to actually be successful at completing the application. So for example, this year we launched a very similar strategy from last year with Better FAFSA rolling out. Our mixed status families can still use the CADA application to be able to complete at least state financial aid eligibility, and then help those students navigate the federal application to get through that process and make sure that California doesn't leave any dollars on the table. So this blueprint really thinks about how are we going to partner differently in terms of CSAC? What is our role in student success is the real question that we were asking ourselves internally. We are in the process of finalizing that strategic plan and then presenting to our commissioners when we get to December. But what I can tell you about it right now is we have three very clear goals: equitable access, which very much has to do with application completion and setting a state goal. If we increase just by 5% every year, we will get to 85% in 4 years. But we've got it, we have to increase by 5% every single year, both for CADA and FAFSA. That's really important for us. So that's equitable access. Equitable access is also about reimagining financial aid for California's low-income Californians in general, reimagining the financial aid that does exist. It's also very much about financial aid literacy gaps. We only have 16 CalSOAPs. And so how do we create that synergy in communities that we don't even have representation? We do that through our K-12 and higher education partners, making sure that they have boots on the ground, helping students complete that application. Particularly after we get them to a higher education institution, what does that renewal process look like? They still have to fill it out. And then we also have a success goal. That's about how we think differently internally about our processes. Let's make that financial aid process more nimble, more effective and clearer and faster. And then our success goals, which is how do we know that these financial aid programs are working? And once our students are eligible and they apply, let's make sure that they actually receive the dollars in time to stay enrolled and to succeed in their education. I'll put the link in the chat, but just really excited to have the partnership and then using this conversation and the PPIC reports to improve on that plan.
Wonderful. Thank you, Daisy. Super exciting. And as researchers, we're excited to find opportunities for us to also kind of work with you and kind of the state in helping inform and improve the policy. So Kristen, I now have a question for you. So we know that the sticker prices of independent colleges and universities are significantly higher than public ones, and that's likely and partly actually a result of the fact that they do not have the state subsidized tuition. But this also means that some families may experience sticker shock, and so they may not even apply to these institutions. How do you see the universal financial aid policy help address this concern? And in what ways does the policy help make an independent college and university more accessible to students?
Oh my gosh, thanks. Thank you for that question. Sticker shock. It is real. We know it is jarring when you see the tuition of one of our private colleges and universities, which really makes this universal application process and policy so critically important, because if that's step one for us to let students and families know that you can afford our colleges. So you have the sticker shock, you have the net price of tuition, it's not subsidized by the state. But with financial aid, with federal aid, the Cal Grant, and institutional aid, we bring down that sticker price. So that's a real critical component around the whole affordability discussion around the universal application, the policy. So we see it as absolute opportunity for us to share out more with the power of financial aid. 75% of students in AICCU institutions receive some form of financial aid. So the institutions are working really hard to enroll these students and to make it affordable. But to enroll them, this needs to be partnership work with the partners on this call, to really demystify the costs of a private college. So Catalina and I have had a lot of discussions on this. It's working again with CBOs to really share out, what does it mean to afford a private college? So, but filling out the FAFSA is step one. It's absolutely step one and critical, which is why this year we're at a lot of different tables of really getting students and family to complete the FAFSA. It may be delayed, but completing it is step one.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. So Catalina, back to you. So we know that according to the National College Attainment Network, 92% of high school seniors who completed the FAFSA were enrolled in college the following November versus about half of those who did not complete. And so from where you sit, what do you see as additional actions, policies that might be needed to help ensure that completion of this financial aid application actually translates into more college going for California students?
No, I think that's a great question. And I feel there's pieces obviously we need to do and continue to do in K-12 to ensure our students, like Dr. Gonzalez just mentioned, the opt-out process and systematizing that it's not something some school districts in California sent that as a blast and said, sign this if you want to opt out. No explanation, no parent meeting, little to no understanding of what they were opting out of, right? And so I imagine if that came to my mom would have said, okay, I got to sign it, right? And not understanding. And so I think we need to look at those systems of the education we're provided in K-12. I also feel we need to look at, we've already taken some steps in the state when it comes to financial literacy and the huge investment our governor and our legislature has made into California colleges, platforms like California Colleges, where there's financial literacy lessons there for students beyond 12th grade. I think that's one of the things we have to look at is how do we bring some of this financial literacy, which is college affordability, earlier before senior year, so it's not a surprise, and connecting the dots on how to pay for school. So there's still work to be done in K-12, but I think we really are getting to a place now with the universal component of the students. My question, in California, so that's in Kansas national data, what is it going to look like for us in California? And I feel we were getting there. And then we had, some of the barriers with better FAFSA. But I think we were getting there to find that, okay, we knew these many students applied to college, did their financial application, but did not show up. What were some of those barriers? And I think we're going to look at, there's not necessarily a strong handoff between K-12 in higher ed when it comes to transitioning them to post-secondary. So let me give you an example when you think of policy. Our funding in K-12 ends when they graduate, right? We had a little bit of wiggle room when we had ESSER funds, right, during the pandemic to use ESSER funds for some of that, but those funds ended at the end of September. So if I have students that I can no longer, provide a counselor the month of July to transition them, because how am I going to pay them? Yet they're not officially students at a private school down the street, California Baptist University. They're not official. So we're in this middle, or our Riverside Community College for me. They're in this middle area, and there's still a need there. There's a gap. So we always call it the summer melt, and it's them melting. It's us, it's the system. We're the ones that are creating the melt, because we don't have necessarily, no one has told us in K-12, hey, you can use some of your funding to get that class of 24 to RCC. It's okay to meet with them over the summer, right? So you have some of these private schools, very prestigious private schools, they're open 12 months. Right? These families have someone available to their students 12 months, because you get that financial aid form. Finally, you know what your package is, but it's June 20th and graduation was June 5th, right? These things happen more often, especially during this last year. They were happening after students already left us. Something simple as a device. So you want to talk about something tangible we're trying to do, but the need is too great when you have 30,000, over 30,000 graduates. One of the top 3 barriers of our students was affordability. The second was we give them a device. That's one thing during pandemic, right? All of our students have a device in K-12, and we're able to solve that digital divide very quickly as a result of the pandemic. But when a student graduates, for the most of our school districts in California, they have to give that device back, right? And so you don't have a computer to navigate those steps to transition. Well, you're not officially a college student yet, so they have their programs for devices, but they can't give them a device yet. So we actually are taking, this last year alone, almost 400 devices, our county office, and we refurbished, and we handed those devices to students. So if you're listening in your school district that some school districts allow students to buy the device because we can't give it to them for a very small fee to get to keep it, $10. We don't have a system for that across the state. So that digital divide starts happening during those 3 months in the summer, right? And so I think those pieces, I'd say there's been amazing work already doing with food insecurities in CalFresh. I've been feeding these students in K-12 since they were preschoolers, everybody. Nothing happens in the last 2 months over the summer that's changing their family life or dynamic that allows them to have food to now start an institution, right? And we have thousands of students. We've given research and data to show we have thousands of students in California that qualify for SNAP benefits but aren't receiving them. And I'm huge shout out to all of our institutions, because I know they're working hard to be able to address those systems there. But I still think goes back to that melt. That melt is a result of us. It's not necessarily always the student and the family. So how do we look to funding, whether it's higher ed, to have increased transitional plans, so they can help more students transition to them, or K-12 giving that freedom to be able to use some of their funding to continue to support students, even though they're no longer officially our students anymore.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to the 3 of you, because I think you guys have done a really great job in kind of ensuring that it's about the structures in place to support students. It's not about the students not doing something and not kind of being proactive. It's like what do we as the state and the segments and the institutions are able to do to support and kind of make these transitions a reality. So I'll pause for just a second. So we're going to begin taking questions from our virtual audience in just a few minutes. And so I just want to make sure that everybody has our email. If you could send your question along with your name and your organization to ppiceventquestions@gmail.com. And then I'll make sure to add them to this conversation. So while we wait for a few questions, I wanted to conclude for a question for all our panelists. And so we've mentioned a few times the 70% attainment goal that the state of California has set by 2030. And we've talked about how ensuring students complete the FAFSA, the CADA, is critical to achieving this goal. And so to wrap up this part of our discussion, I wanted to make sure that our audience members are left with some actionable recommendations on strategies that will help them boost college financial aid applications. But importantly, what can they do to ensure that these efforts translate into higher rates of college enrollment and higher rates of college completion? Do you see a need for additional legislation or funding? What can the state and institutions do to support these efforts? And I'll start with you, Daisy.
I was just gonna say, let's expand this by 30 more minutes. No, I'll be quick. There is so much that we could do, but listen, we are at a crossroads. I'm so excited that you mentioned the 70% goal for the state of California, because the reality is that we need every student to know about financial aid earlier, whether they go or not their senior year. The economy of tomorrow will require them to have a baccalaureate degree or higher. That's just the reality. That's how we get people out of poverty. And that crossroad is this: we need to restore trust in FAFSA, in our application, in CADA, because of all the external challenges, from delays to just how problematic it has been for students in the last year. Restoring trust is important. Reaching students earlier is super important, right? It's what Catalina shared. We've got to start earlier. We've got to start at the middle school, especially with more and more students going to the community colleges for dual enrollment. And then when our students do enter that workforce and they choose not to go immediately into their education, they still need to have that door open, which is why we need to together work on expanding access to financial aid to more and more Californians. Because if we miss them as they were coming out of high school, they will and should, to get out of poverty, return back to higher education. And then we're talking about more low-income students, more adult working learners wanting to access AICCU institutions and hopefully public universities in our state.
Catalina?
But I feel like I gave a few answers. I lived here for Kristen. I want to hear definitely what Kristen has to say. I feel like I gave a few of those.
Yes,
things I'm
I agree.
thinking
Thank you
about.
so much. I think you
Yes.
did.
Go ahead,
So
let's hear
Kristen?
Yeah, and Catalina, I think what you said earlier too, right? There's no seamless handoff between these students, between K through 12 and higher ed. So filling that space is going to be really important. And so when I think about that, I think about the work between all of us and with community-based organizations. They are so important to help us reach these students and families. It's going to take all of us. And to get to that 70-degree attainment, it's going to take every single segment working together to enroll more students and to enroll them through completion. Success is when they graduate and they go into the workforce and contribute to, to our society. So this report really showed the power of just 1 year of that universal application. If we can continue to do that successively the next couple of years, we are going to reach that attainment goal. But to reach that attainment goal is one thing. It's going to make sure that affordability remains front and center for these students and families. It's going to take doubling the Pell Grant. It's going to take making continued investments in the Cal Grant program. For our sector and for the other segments, it's also institutional aid and prioritizing that. So affordability, it's a partnership between the federal, state, and institutions. And further on, this is really partnership work to serve these students and families so that they see themselves in college, going to college, and that it starts, as you said, Daisy, early, and it's successive through K through 12 and through higher ed. So how do we really streamline the process for these students and families so that this is all achievable? For California, you mentioned, the sticker shock. We're working on that. We've created an initiative called California Private College is Possible, and it's really to put resources there together about financial aid, what our programs look like, what our institutions look like, so that we can, be a bigger part of serving these students and being part of achieving that 70% goal the governor has put for this state.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we do have a question from the audience. And so this is from a high school vice principal in Southern California. And so he asks, that in his region, he sees that not every student needs or wants to attend college. So can you tell him why should he or she complete a financial aid application if college is not currently or at that point their goal? And we hear that actually, that's often, and it's a reason why some other states might actually have rolled back some of this legislation. So I'm curious to know from our panelists what your thoughts are on that.
Game on. Send me that student. I want to say, give me the number. I bet you I can convince the family. I think it's not just college, right? It's not just 4-year. It's all about providing students post-secondary options. We can all agree that education beyond a high school diploma is needed for a viable career, a viable future, health insurance, retirement, even a trade school, technical schools. I think the first question is, it's not just how are we talking to students? We're talking about post-secondary. We don't just say college, you got to do your FAFSA so you can go to college. Trade school, technical schools, all of those opportunities for our students. We're encouraging them. It's just about options. But I go back to is, often we have, I work in a lot of rural areas. Coachella Valley is one of our rural counties, one of our rural school districts. Many of those students have never left there. So when a 16 or 17-year-old student says, I don't want to go to college, my first question is what's their family life? What conditions have they even left the community they lived in? What type of college and career exploration, career development are you providing these students if it's not at home? Kind of we talked about in the beginning, if you're first gen and you're working with a first gen population, you have to ask yourself, if they're not getting this at home, and we're not providing career exploration opportunities for them to know what else is out there besides what's in front of them, then are they really making an educated decision to say, I don't want to go to college? And I think that's one of the things you go back that needs to happen more in K-12. We're not starting with careers, and our students are different. They don't want to just go to a 4-year college for the football games like maybe we used to get them to, right? Like they want to make money quicker. They want to work, which is great. There's so many different avenues to be able to show those connections. But I think a lot of what we find is they don't have that exposure, right? And so if you're first generation, so I'll speak for myself, the only people in my life that had a college degree till after I was 18 were my teachers. Those are the only people I've ever interacted with. And so I didn't know what else was out there besides what was in front of me. And so I think it's so important our school districts in California reflect and say, well, what opportunities are we showing them about careers and starting with careers? It's not just about college, but it's about starting with the careers. So really, once you're asking those questions, and I think lastly, we encourage our students, even if you decide not to go, our job was to open up opportunities so you have multiple doors you can go through after graduation, after May 1st, when you decide, but we don't want to close them. And at the end of the day, I would tell, vice principal, and I know you're dealing with so much. I hear you, I'm in schools a lot weekly, and I know there's so much going on, and this is another thing to do. I think that's at that point does they opt out. When you've done the education, the career exploration, you've given those students different opportunities in those families, if that's the choice they made, but it didn't happen by default. And that this universal requirement is not a punishment. It's not a you must. It's I believe in you. I want to give you this opportunity, and I want you to have this opportunity.
Wonderful. Daisy, Kristen, any thoughts before I close?
No, just really well said, Catalina. And big reminder, our financial aid application in California opens December 1st. We have a lot of work to do, but I know that we can do this.
Yeah. It's to the vice principal too. It's our responsibility to work with you and support you as well. So this value discussion around higher education, the value of a degree, it's something we're all deeply immersed in right now, and looking at policy statewide. So your college degree goes on to a career, and whether you do that through a 2-year program or whether a 4-year program, there's lots of avenues, but we're here to be in partner with you to talk about what those avenues look like.
Wonderful. So we've reached the end of our program, and I want to thank Kevin for his great presentation. And I want to thank a big thank you to our panelists, Catalina Cifuentes, Daisy Gonzalez, Kristen Soares, for joining me today. I also want to thank the Evelyn and Walter Haas Jr. Fund, the Kresge Foundation, and the Sutton Family Fund for their support of this research. And thanks to all our audience for joining us online today. We would appreciate you taking a moment to give us feedback on this event. If you pre-registered for the event, you will receive an email later today with a link to a short survey. You can also scan this QR code that's on your screen right now to help us gather feedback, make these programs better. Finally, a recording of today's event will be available on the PPIC website, and you can also find this recording on our YouTube channel later so that you can view it again or share it with your colleagues. So thank you very much again for joining us today, and thank you to our panelists and the team of researchers for your excellent work. Thank you and have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.